Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding and Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And I'm really happy to welcome today my friend, Dr. Lisa Herrick. She's a family therapist and an experienced collaborative divorce coach. A large part of her practice is devoted to working with families struggling through separation and divorce, and Dr. Herrick has been a leader in the collaborative practice communities in the greater Washington, D.C. area for almost 20 years. Welcome, Lisa Herrick. It's really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk with you.
And, I think that a lot of people who are going through the divorce process, I don't think this, I know this because it's my own personal experience as well as my professional experience of working with my clients, really struggle with the change in that parenting relationship, and I think for me, the hardest part of getting divorced was not seeing my children in their beds every night in my house. And with the holidays coming up, that can also be super, super hard, right? And so let's start with how long do you think it takes for the new normal to seem normal?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, it really varies. I think partly it varies in terms of the individual personalities and sort of the level of resilience of everybody involved. But it also depends on how the separation and divorce happened. There's some that are relatively amicable and sort of have been developing over time. And then there's some that are shocking and sudden and traumatic. And, that's partly going to dictate how long it takes for people to sort of what I call adjust, adapt, and recover. That's an arc of time. And it definitely takes some time for everybody. It doesn't happen quickly.
Yeah. And, a lot of my clients say, we're going to have the holidays together. What do you think about that as a strategy? We're going to do that for the kids. We're going to have the holidays together. What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. That comes up a lot. I mean, parents talk a lot, even when they're creating their parenting plan, their custody agreement, about having family dinners on Friday nights, like right away, including holidays or birthday celebrations. And I generally talk to them about the idea that it's very hard to adjust to big changes if the changes don't actually happen, and that children are easily confused about what a separation or divorce means. And a lot of children think, even adolescents think, it's temporary. Parents might say it's permanent, but kids sort of fantasize that it's temporary and everything's going to go back to normal. And it can be really confusing for kids when parents are pretty amicable. And, they might go out for pizza after a soccer game and have fun, and mom and dad might be laughing. And kids look at that, they watch really carefully, and they wonder what it means. So when people talk about getting together soon after a separation, and I'm really talking about literally soon after the time the parents separate into two dwellings, I usually tell them to take a little time, kind of press pause. It doesn't mean being unfriendly or not talking to your spouse on the sidelines of a game, but it means give it a little time when you're not having family dinners. And if you're separating right before the holidays, be really thoughtful about maybe a small visit, a small time, a short time that's pretty boundaried when you're together, but most of it separate because you've told the kids you're separated. And it's very anxiety provoking, and they need practice. They need time to get used to that. So of course, around the holidays, everything is so fraught. There might be exceptions, but usually I tell people just pause, wait a bit, and then decide if everybody in the family is ready to do things together or to do something together. And it really depends on whether everybody in the family is ready.
Well, you said so much there, Lisa Herrick, that I just want to tease that apart a little bit because I think one of the things that you said, I think might feel really counterintuitive to some people. And that is that it may actually not be so good for your kids to show togetherness or to spend all this time together so that you can demonstrate to them in your deeds, not just your words, that you really are separating and so that they can deal with the confusion of that and actually come up against it, which is, I think that parents feel guilty. I certainly did feel guilty about divorcing, I'm really trying not to use the words breaking the family because I really don't think that's the right way to think about it. But I think that's what people think. Well, I'm deciding to break up my family, so I'm going to do everything I can to make it seem like de minimis, like it's not a big deal, to the kids when it is a big deal. That I
Right.
think you're saying, right? It is a big deal, and let the kids get a chance to adjust to it. And then once the adjustment is made, and I don't think you're saying wait 10 years, once they accept it, then you can introduce moments of togetherness or some shared holidays or dinners or something like that, but not right away.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not talking about 10 years. And again, there's no formula. It's not like after 3 months, it'll all be fine. One of the things it depends on is how everybody in the family is dealing with the separation and the news of the divorce or news of the separation. Because in many families, one spouse has been planning this for a long time. They've been adjusting to it for a long time. And when it actually happens, they're well on the road to adapting and to feeling normal with the idea of being separate. While their partner or spouse, it's like, a tsunami has just knocked them over. And the idea of suddenly going out for dinner and laughing and smiling and pretending just feels impossible. And it feels weird. It feels like, why would I do that? Like, this has happened. Why would I now pretend it hasn't happened? So part of the challenge is, and again, depending on what the breakup was like, the challenge is figuring out when both parents are in relatively the same space in terms of their comfort level of being together. Kids really benefit from all of the little signs of amiability, the talking to each other on the sidelines, the getting their spouse a cup of coffee at the basketball game, saying hello, all of that is really important. Transitions going smoothly, at handoffs, being able to say, oh, the traffic was terrible. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just being friendly. That's important. That's different than going out for pizza together or celebrating Christmas morning together. The two are really different.
Yeah. Well, I think I can hardly imagine that if someone is still feeling really raw and in a lot of pain about it, that's not incredibly obvious to the kids. Right.
Exactly.
And it would be really hard. I just think about myself. I think it would be really hard not to say something like, whew, that was tough, or we got through that, or, even like something like that. And kids are so sensitive about those tiny little things, as you're saying, like that doesn't sound like, here's a cup of coffee. I know you like it with milk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember when I got divorced, which is over 20 years ago, my former husband had a girlfriend. He had a girlfriend probably before we got divorced, but he had a girlfriend soon after. And my kids started spending time with her. And I remember one particular incident when my daughter came home from a visit with her dad, when she'd spent some time with his girlfriend, and she was so excited to tell me about the bunny rabbit they had. And I made some snarky comment, like, well, of course she has a bunny rabbit. Like, obviously she has a bunny rabbit. She has everything else. She has a bunny rabbit too. And my daughter looked stricken. She was 11. She looked stricken. She looked like I had just said like the worst possible thing about somebody she loved, not the girlfriend, her dad. And I felt terrible. And that was a lesson. It was like, I got to be okay with things, at least in this way, but I couldn't have gone out for dinner with them at that point.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been pretty.
No.
I'm Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce-related topics so that everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Dr. Lisa Herrick about families and divorce and transitions for children and how to really think about doing the best thing by your kids and developing that plan and spending time together. So, Dr. Herrick, what about nesting? I think a lot of people think that this is great for the kids, just along those same terms, as it really is much less disruptive. And it is much less disruptive for children to not have to move back and forth and all of that. But it does put people sharing living space, maybe not at the same time, but sharing that space. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it's a bit of a parallel answer. When people are considering nesting, I ask them how they think it will go, sharing space, making sure there's food in the refrigerator, making sure the laundry's done.
In the dishwasher, my least
Yeah,
favorite chore.
emptying the dishwasher. And, sometimes they have to share the marital bedroom, right? They don't have enough rooms in the house. So they're going in and out of their old bedroom. How is that going to feel? Where are they going to be when they're not in the home? And how is that going to feel? Sometimes, people say it actually feels okay and it just seems so much better. And we don't want our kids to bounce around. I say, you know what? If you feel ready for it, then absolutely try it. If it starts getting tense and you start bickering and conflict starts to increase, you need to have a plan B. Let's talk about what the plan B would be.
Yeah, I think that's really true, that it can, in some ways, things can calm down the further away from the marriage you get. And I think that's most people's experience. But the nesting can lead you to get to dust off your crystal ball and think, well, what happens when these people repartner?
Yeah.
Right. And what is this going to be a sort of a block to that too? And for those people who are listening, thinking, well, my kids come before any future partner, yes, of course they do. At the same time, you're probably going to want to find a way to have it all, right? Have this another other new partner in your life and your kids, and to say, well, half the time we're going to sleep in my, marital bed, or I'm not going to live with you, more likely, right? So I'm going to live with you half the time and with them half the time. I mean, your children might want to have a relationship with that person. So I guess I'm asking a lot of things. I mean, one thing is, obviously the question is how to introduce a child or children to a new partner, but also thinking through that plan B. And in some ways, it can feel like a prenup. Like, in a way, we're planning for this not to work out. But listen, it's not always the greatest thing. It can be that this is really good in the short term, but it doesn't work in the long term. But I have people who did it for 10 years.
Yeah, that's unusual. I mean, my experience is people tend to do it for like 3 to 6 months. They're doing it to build up a little money in the bank, to figure out where the next place is going to be, to get through the divorce. But some people do it for a long term. And I think talking about the idea of a future partner is really tricky, but important, because it even comes up when you're talking to parents about planning holidays, right? They can come up with a plan for togetherness over the holidays. We're going to do Thanksgiving dinner together. We always do it at your parents'. I'm happy to go to your parents'. I love your parents'. We'll still do it at your parents'. And we just won't change that. And you can have Thanksgiving every year. Let's put that in our agreement. Nobody's thinking about a third person or a.
I will not do that, by the way. I will not write into an agreement that we're going to celebrate it every year together. I'm like, if you want to do that, fabulous. But let's not write it into a legally binding contract. What if you don't want to? Or you go to family court and say, she has to come have Thanksgiving with my parents because that's what it says in the agreement. No one's.
I would never say you have to be together, but some people want in the agreement that one parent gets Thanksgiving every year.
For sure. I think that's totally fine. I mean, I don't want to get off the topic, but I think that holidays can be alternated or divided. And you can say one parent gets Thanksgiving in exchange for something else every year. Totally fine. I'm good with that. But no dictating you're going to do it together.
Right. I guess what I worry about is when somebody repartners and they say, I'd like to spend Thanksgiving with you and your kids with my family. And that's
Yeah.
suddenly a problem. So I think the whole idea is sort of, how do you imagine future life while you're just going through the divorce and making the plans, or early on and you're adjusting? It's very hard to imagine future life, good and bad. It's just, it feels like a big void you're going into, all these different things.
Yeah, and I think it is when you, especially if sometimes people feel really burned by romantic partnership when they're getting divorced. I say to people all the time, so listen, before you get remarried, please call me so we could talk about a prenup. And they say, Catherine, I'm not even dating. I'm never going to get remarried. And I'm like, uh-huh. So when that happens, then they call 2 years later and they go, ha, 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 guess what? You'll never guess. I'm like, I know. I've guessed you're getting married, right? Yes. How'd you know? I'm like, because that sort of sense of awfulness and like I don't trust anybody, luckily it wears off. So
And that is part of the adjustment, right? There's so many ways people have to adapt, and there's so many ways the kids have to adapt. And so I think sort of my rule of thumb is, when you're thinking about how separate we're going to be, and are we going to have some overlap, and what is it that we would plan to do together, it's really important just to be thoughtful and maybe pulse the kids. You might have 2 kids, you might have 3 kids, they might be different ages, they might feel really differently. Some kids say that would be too weird. Like, that's weird. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to know how to talk. Other kids would be like, oh, that would be so nice if we all did it together. But it's
yeah,
important to talk to the kids about it.
I think that's a really good point. You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Dr. Lisa Herrick. She's a family therapist and an experienced collaborative divorce coach about parenting plans and how to parent your children through divorce. And Lisa, if people are interested in learning about you or getting in touch with you, how best can they do that?
Thank you. I have a website. It's very easy to remember. It's www.lisaherrick.com. That's it.
So that's Lisa, Lisa, and Herrick, Herrick.
That's right. lisaherrick.com. You'll find it very easily. There's a ton of information on it.
So since we're talking about repartnering, and this is a huge question I think that people often wonder, how long should children be protected from that new relationship? And once the time comes to introduce a new partner, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, huge question. And really, the basic answer is like, go slow. Now, what does that mean for everybody? Again, like, there's no formula. But if you just think about how many changes the children have to adjust to when people separate, a different dwelling, a different schedule, a different way to experience their parents, the idea that their parents aren't together anymore, the loss of the family that looks a certain way. There are just so many things. And adjusting to the idea that one parent has a romantic partner is another huge change. So I just tell people, slow it down. If you want to date when you don't have the kids, and don't be talking to your sweetheart, on FaceTime when you're with your children. Don't be giggling on the Zoom with your partner when you're with the children. Like, give it some time. On the other hand, I don't tell parents to lie. Parents say, well, I do want to date. And I say, well, tell your kids, you have a social life and you're going out with friends and different people, and that's happening. But you're not going to get married again anytime soon. They don't need to worry about that, because that's what they worry about. I think if you can wait 6 months before introducing the kids, that would be really helpful. Some people can do that and some people don't. And then whenever you're ready to introduce the person, again, I just say, like, take it slow. If you want this to go well, then slow it down, because you don't want angry children not wanting to talk to your new date. Like, you want your kids to be ready to have fun with them. So give it time. And I also tell parents to introduce new partners from the outside in, which means the first time you introduce kids to your partner, do something out in the world. Go bowling, go to a big neighborhood barbecue. Just go out and do it in a situation where the kids don't have to look face to face to your partner through a whole dinner. And then slowly move it towards a more intimate setting like your home, and do that later. And talk to the kids throughout the whole process and see how they're doing so that you set it up for success.
Do you think you should tell them you're just friends?
No, that's such a common mistake. Oh, this is my friend from work. I tell people, kids have large antenna on their heads that you can't see, but they're always scanning for information. And that is information that is picked up very easily. Sometimes kids don't know how to interpret what they're picking up through their antenna, but they know it's weird and they feel like their parent is lying to them or just, gaslighting them, saying something that isn't true. So I say, look, don't do that. Say, this is somebody that I'm interested in romantically, and I'd like you to meet her or him.
What if they already know the person and the relationship has evolved from neighbor, friend, colleague, Joey's dad, whatever, to something different? I mean, that happens not infrequently.
Oh, for sure. That does happen. I mean, I think the bottom line is you need to be honest with your children. If they're asking questions, if they're already wondering, then I think you need to have an honest conversation. It needs to have boundaries around it. You don't have to give them every dirty detail, but you can say, well, you picked that up because actually we have gone on some dates. We've known her forever. She used to be a friend. She used to be your, gym teacher. She used to be whatever. I know she lives down the street, but we've gone on a few dates. I really like her. I really like him. So we'll probably go on some more dates. I'll let you know how it goes. Nothing big to worry about, but I'll keep you posted. There might be a lot of reactions to that. So you got to be ready.
And Lisa Herrick, sometimes people, when they're divorcing, are thinking about, should the ex-spouse know that a significant other is going to be introduced before the kids are introduced? And sometimes, we discuss veto power, but just so that the children aren't, I think that the children shouldn't feel weird saying, hey, mom, I just met dad's new girlfriend, right? And so that they're not the deliverer of that news. But I'm wondering what you think about that.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I always strongly recommend to people that you notify your co-parent that it's not permission, it's notification, that you just let them know that I am going to introduce my person to the kids. We're going bowling. It's going to be next Sunday. I'm just letting you know. That's all you need to say.
So we're almost out of time, and I'm wondering, what other pearls of wisdom do you have for our audience? Like, what have we not talked about that you think would be really useful for people to know?
Well, I think if you are moving towards a phase of having some things all together, I mean, maybe the parents are repartnered and they have a pretty good relationship, and people decide we are going to do something all together for a child's birthday, or we are going to do something all together on Sunday afternoon. We're all going to go to the zoo. Like, we're going to do something together. Other than talking to everybody about how that feels, I think parents need to make sure their partners are ready to do that and have a very relaxed relationship with the children already. You don't do that when somebody's new. And you check in about how that's going. And you check in with your new partner about sort of a little bit about the rules. Like, this child acts up, that, because mom's going to deal with it, or I'm going to deal with it. You're off duty. Just so that the new partner doesn't put their foot in it when you're all together, because those roles can get really confusing. So if you're ready to do that, I mean, there's some talking to be done beforehand.
Before we end, I just want to say that I have been remarried for almost 25 years. And a couple of years ago, my stepdaughter was getting married, and she and her mom and I and my daughters went dress shopping with her.
Awesome.
And I really was struck by how time heals a lot, right? And what would have been an incredibly tense get together 20 years ago, it was now totally fine. And then we all went out to lunch afterward, and it was actually really nice. And it was very relaxed for me. I think it might have been a little more difficult for my stepdaughter, but this was what it worked. It really worked. And we were able to all show up for somebody that we all love and really think of each other as just parts of the different parts of the family.
Yeah, well, that is wonderful. And I think that just speaks to the obvious benefit of being able to have together time, which is you can celebrate some things together and everybody can have a good time at those celebrations. And the kids can be with both parents at the same time
When the time is right.
when the time is right.
Dr. Lisa Herrick, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.